Good evening and welcome to the August meeting of the New Ulm Heritage Preservation Commission. Calling the meeting to order, and the first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the March regular meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? They follow the agenda. And I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Second. Is there any discussion or changes? Move to accept the minutes. All say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. We go to design review, and the first signage is for the New Ulm Wellness Collective. Elwood?
As you can see in your packets, application was made by Joan Lindholm on behalf of the New Ulm Wellness Collective, 15 South Minnesota, and proposing a hanging sign attached to the front of the building. In your packet, you've got a design of a 17 by 26 oval that's going to stick out 33 inches out from the building face, and the frame itself is going to be about 28 inches tall, and then they've got a mock-up of it, how it's going to look on the front of the building.
Elwood, did they say that this was the color?
Yes,
Okay.
that's the color they're looking for.
Okay. Well, that's
That is
fine.
their local color.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, it's fine. I don't, there wasn't, no one was able to be here from?
Correct, there is a little bit of letter in there.
Yep.
Due to their busy schedule, nobody was able to be here.
And that's fine.
I told her if we had any questions that, when we looked at it, I didn't think it was going to be too much of a problem, but I said if we had to, we probably could just do a subcommittee if you had any questions or concerns about it, and take it back that way.
Does anybody have any questions, comments?
The comment I have is, I know in the past, for a while, the sign review, which we're going to be working on, this was
Correct.
one of the things that the HPC actually pushed for, going back to
Correct.
the signs hanging over the sidewalk, and they approved many of them like this.
The only question I had when I looked at it, and what I didn't see this note when I had seen it earlier, but it says two small chains to stabilize.
Correct.
Okay, is that fairly common? Are they
Yeah, it gives it a little more stability.
just the rigidity? And I'm
correct.
assuming that's the chain coming at the angle from the top?
Yeah, that the hand-drawn pieces in there that
Okay.
this change and what
Okay.
represents.
Anyone else have any questions? I would accept a motion
Also move.
to approve.
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
Second. Is there any more questions or discussion?
Just one minor, just a little correction, the date, I assume they meant August 8th.
I just saw that,
Yeah.
yeah, before the meeting too, yeah.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
accepted, but
Okay. And call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Accept the sign. And Elwood, you'll get back to, Joan?
I will let Joan know, yes.
thank you. I'm not gonna try to pronounce the name. Is it Horse? Horse? Graphics? Okay. Elwood?
The next sign review is submitted by Randy Horsch, Horsch Graphics, 311 North Minnesota. Looking for a sign in the front and back. You can see as the dimensions, there's looking at 120 inches across and about 47 inches tall on the sign, with one going on the back of the building facing the alley, and another going on the front of the building up on the roof facing Minnesota Street. And this building is set back off of Minnesota, back along the alley.
Okay. Hi, do you want to step up to the microphone and introduce yourself, please?
My name is Randy. I own Horse Graphics.
Okay.
Relatively new business to town.
It's been there. I noticed the sign.
I've been working out of there for about a month now, I guess. I have a banner temporarily hanging up so people can find me.
All of a sudden, I noticed the church was gone and
Yeah,
you were there.
yeah. I just I purchased the building and end of April, the day after my birthday, actually, and
Happy birthday.
Belated.
we've
belated,
been
yeah.
slowly working our way in.
Okay. Now, I have a question. There is a sign on the front now. Is that coming down, and the one going
Yes.
on the roof how is that going to be mounted?
So when I purchased the building, in the shop area, there was an old frame that was left behind, which gets bolted onto the roof.
Onto the roof?
So the sign would mount to that.
Okay.
And the one that's currently up is just a banner, temporary,
Yeah,
like I
yeah,
said, so
yeah.
people can find it.
Okay.
That'll come down.
And these are the colors, which are,
Yes, yep, those are the colors that I've chosen to represent my brand.
okay. Does anyone have any questions for Randy?
What's the sign made of? Is it metal or?
Yeah, so I'll use a metal material called Alumicore. It's 2 sheets of aluminum with corrugated plastic in between. Pretty
Not familiar
rigid.
with that,
So,
Are you going to, okay,
and then it would bolt onto the frame.
okay.
And on the back side, it would just bolt into the brick or the block.
Okay. I didn't see that you were in any way, like, putting any spots or lights, which are a good thing. You really, lighting is kind of a touchy thing, and I don't know how you'd hang something over that, so you
My,
are,
my initial plan on the front side would be to have a light shining up on it. There is some electrical power in that spot.
that would be questionable.
Is that existing?
It is existing, yep. The wires are existing, yep.
The wires are existing, but there's no lighting.
There's no
there.
light, no.
Yeah, that you would have to come back and talk about.
Well, that uplighting and overlighting was exterior on it, was fine.
Is the uplighting
Yeah,
is
it's just not backlit.
not backlighting?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
So on the picture here, it shows 120 inches. Is that for the back sign or
Yeah.
the front sign or both?
Both. So they
So
would
the
be,
front sign's going to be very large.
right, about 4 by 10,
Okay.
as well as the back. They would be the same size.
So the sign in the front of the building that you're showing here is not proportional to the picture?
Not necessarily, no.
One comment on that, I actually
It's
spoke
pretty
with,
large.
but I spoke with the building official. He's still within the criteria for
Still
our
within,
sign
yeah.
ordinance of square footage.
Yeah, he is.
I believe it's 100, Elwood?
Correct.
Right.
It
100
is.
square feet.
So it's,
So you're within that criteria.
that's what I was trying to do the math in my head, and yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it'll appear much larger than it does on the picture here.
Yeah.
Possibly a little bit larger, yeah.
Okay.
One comment I want to make is, what I used to always look at was, it's not marked on here, contributing or non-contributing. This is a non-contributing building.
Right.
I mean,
Correct.
we've got 2 districts. We've got our own commercial center historic district, which is broader, and we've got the national
Right.
historic district. This one is not in there, a
No.
newer building.
This is in the local district.
Right.
Right.
Which those are going to be numerous questions I'm going to have for somebody on the next agenda item.
Yeah, yeah.
So the sign on the front, just going off of the ribs, it's about 24 inches smaller
Okay.
Then the one
than
going.
what's showing here. That one's about 24 inches smaller than the actual one would be. So it'd cover about another rib and a half on the roof
yeah,
line. Yep.
yeah.
So it's close.
That's what I was
That's
trying to
close.
figure out.
It is, yeah, pretty large, but I've noticed just in the short time that I have been there is people can't seem to find the building because I'm set back from everyone else.
I saw
So-
it right away.
Yeah, I wouldn't have expected it to be as hard, but apparently it is for some people.
I guess I walk that block a lot, so. And the sign on the back, even though we don't always pay that close attention to alleys, but we have to start because they're becoming better traveled, and that's acceptable too. I mean, it's fine, it's great. So, any other questions? I will call for a motion.
A motion to approve.
Approve, okay,
I'll second.
second. No further discussion?
Just one other comment I'm gonna make, and we have our downtown guidelines here.
Right.
But you take a newer building like this, I look at it, there isn't a facade. There is nowhere to put a sign, either you put it
No.
on the railing or
Right.
on the angled roof. It's unique.
That's kind of why I was concerned, because it's, the way he's gonna mount it up, if it was up there, it's gonna catch a lot of wind and stuff, but,
I think I should be able to make it pretty solid.
okay.
I don't want it to come down any more than you do, so.
I don't want your whole roof to come down.
No, no, me neither.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You have a sign,
All right.
two
good.
signs.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Zahn, you're on next, downtown guideline update, please. Are you going to be needing your computer to project or to do anything?
No, I just am gonna be taking notes throughout all this, and I thought, I have this stuff spread out in front of me, that's why.
Well, is it gonna bother the,
Check with Ron, see if we can get a,
We just move a mic from. Oh, yeah. That's why I was looking to stretch it over there. There you go. Okay. Thank you.
okay, while he's setting up, we have a, grant that was applied for through us, to redo and update the downtown preservation guidelines. That grant was accepted. We did a, our RFP. Mr. Zahn's firm came in
correct.
and thus has been given the go-ahead to proceed, just to bring everyone up to date. Mr. Zahn.
And so, Thomas Zahn, St. Paul office, Thomas R. Zahn and Associates. I did the original design guidelines that I have in front of me dated September 2006 for downtown New Ulm. And have done most of the design guidelines throughout the state. I mean, I don't know if anybody even bids against me anymore, just because I've kind of been doing this for a long time. And guidelines have changed and improved and grown, and ideas have been introduced. The most recent design guidelines that I completed were for Excelsior, City of Excelsior. And I don't know if you had a chance to see or take a look at these, but there are whole areas of changes that we've gone into in design guidelines. So that may or may not affect what we talk about, but it's something that I wanted to make you aware of, that there are other ideas that have come up through time. So anyway, my understanding is that you have lots of questions, and I'll try to address them as best I can and take notes, and then we'll, I'm assuming that at some point along the way, those will be all put in maybe into one document so that I can take with me, or I don't know if I'm going to be taking things with me tonight or not. It seems that the various commission members have got each of their own notes on this, so we can.
Well, Elwood and I did discuss this briefly, and Elwood had sent you some notes that he wanted looked at, like,
We
the
talked about
concerns or
some.
signage and lighting and
We talked about that over the phone. I haven't.
demolition.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those were
But
the,
about specifics, I mean, I probably, it would be nice to get them in some sort of written format.
Yeah, we'll get notes and send you
Okay.
something out.
Yeah.
you can, Missy can take care of
Yep.
those. Okay. All right, I'm gonna let everyone go down the line if that's what they want, and open the questions up to Tom, and I'm looking at you. You get to be first, you're at the end, yeah?
My biggest one, Tom, is with our signs. I mean, that's mainly what the HPC does have come in front of them. And one of the topics, we'll go way back to when Ann Makepeace and I talked about it, the historic downtown guidelines. What era are we looking for? You know, we had an earlier discussion here about, what was it, 1912 you said, or whatever date? I mean, you know, when I used to be on this commission, the liaison to it, other historic cities, I'd look at signs all day long. And there's such a broad variety of what historic districts allow. I mean, you go to Wisconsin, some of the older cities along Lake Michigan, the whole side of the building is still painted Coca-Cola. And yet...
And those are encouraged. Those ghost signs are encouraged by the National Park Service, and, yeah.
That's what I want to get to. We've had that discussion here and past HPCs, oh, no, we can't do that. We can't do that. Why not? We've got historic photos of downtown New Ulm showing it. One that comes to my mind, dating myself, was the Stork Brothers building. I remember that, the yellow, black, and by Pullman's. Well, so somebody would come in today and want to do that. No, you can't do that. Why not? But what are other municipalities doing with it?
Well, I think one of the concerns that we have in design guidelines is to create a environment where it's not too much visual noise. I mean, if before the meeting we were talking about the idea of signage on the tops of the awnings, and I can pull up all kinds of pictures, not necessarily of this community, but of communities in St. Paul or whatever that had signage everywhere, but it was just a lot of visual clutter. So, I mean, you have to balance out the idea of what may have been historic with what is usable and readable and serves good purpose to advertise a building. Regarding the time of that's important is the period when the building itself was built. So you have the Ace hardware store downtown that was built during the 30s, I think, 30s or 40s, and it had a Art Deco front. So the signage for that is appropriately the Art Deco period, or especially if you have any kind of historic pictures of the building. That helps, gives us some idea, and we did for that particular building. So I don't think it's not so much that you're trying to create a museum of the downtown community of, say, 1910 or 1900 or 1930. It should relate to the actual buildings themselves. So there will be a range of buildings. Now, if somebody comes in and wants to do something really modern on a building that was built in 1910, then you have to really look at that very hard. But basically, you as a commission who's responsible for reviewing permit proposals and consequently following guidelines, they are guidelines, so you have flexibility among yourselves, you know, the commission does, to approve things.
You know, we have like an example.
Within your own sign ordinances.
Right.
And, yeah.
Like we have, you know, message and design. You know, it says that the treatment, it projects your image and is clear and easy to read. Well, like the gentleman we just approved, that's a newer building. I mean,
okay.
Very new compared to our downtown. Okay, his image, he's going to be in the sign business. I mean, is that allowable or not? You know, there's a little bit of flashiness
well,
in that sign.
On a newer building,
it's
not going to be as big an issue as with, or unless it's highly visible from the main right-of-way. But generally, you know, there's flexibility that, again, downtowns aren't supposed to be museums. They're supposed to show natural growth, too. So if a new building was built, then new signage should be compatible with the architecture, but also complementary to the context that it's in. So you have to deal with color and lettering and all sorts of things that would make it compatible with the buildings around it. But it doesn't have, you know, generally there's no, you know, hard and fast rule that you can follow there, other than the fact that you have to be reasonable, and it has to be something that's compatible with your downtown, and doesn't conflict or draw too much attention to itself, above and beyond, what you're trying to create in your storefronts and your.
It has to blend into the
And
neighborhood.
blend into the neighborhood, yeah.
It's
It's like somebody that paints their house pink in a historic
Right, the-
district,
the
I
flashy
mean.
colors.
Yeah,
And the other one, when this first went into effect, was, I don't know if anybody remembers, they used to be very argumentative about the size. No letter higher than. And yet it's not in here, but a lot of
Well, that-
contributors said, like, hey, you can't go over 16 inches.
well, those things usually are found in the sign ordinances as opposed to the design guidelines.
No,
But,
not in
well, I
ours.
mean, maybe not here,
Right.
but most places that I've worked in, I think Excelsior is a good example of that, is they have very strict sign limits.
I believe it
and their
was always
signage.
quoted, was it from the Park Service?
Man Makepeace gave a presentation one
Yeah.
time, and I think it was from the Park Service, saying 15 inches was
Right.
as big as they wanted to see. 12 is generally where they were. 9 to 12 is where they were at. But the guideline just says 60% of sign coverage
Right.
is. So if you've got the larger signs, you can have larger.
I mean,
Letters.
the city of New Ulm has its own separate sign ordinance. Do you actually need a separate one for your historic district? That I believe did not change. When we adopted this, that didn't change,
Correct.
right? You're still allowed X amount of footage.
Mm-hmm.
It's been in the ordinance forever, 1969, 70.
Well, this is, again, is not an ordinance. It's supposed to give you direction.
Right.
And I go back somewhat to Excelsior, and I'm no expert on their sign ordinance, but they when they went through the process of developing design guidelines for their downtown, they had some sort of design standards that they had already established for the whole community, all the commercial businesses in the community, and then they had, so we worked together with the in developing a sign ordinance and developing, and I didn't do a lot of it because we had a planner there that was working on it mostly, but we wanted to make sure there was nothing that was, that there were no conflicts between what we said and what the sign ordinance said. I tend to prefer to stay clear of doing anything that specifically calls for that because these are supposed to be design guidelines. In Excelsior, we took it to the next step where we put general, for example, general masonry guidelines and general wood guidelines, and we probably have, there's probably something in here about signs. And we numbered them and said, you should do this or you should do that, but that's getting, SHPO approved this, but it seems to be outside kind of the realm of where if you get too specific about things, then there's no chance for creativity, and there's no reason to even have a commission, because if it can all be just, well, this isn't it, you just check it off, so my inclination is to encourage you to be open, but at the same time be cognizant of what you're trying to preserve. And if something doesn't feel right, it's your option as the commission and having a historic district. It doesn't have to be in stone in the design guidelines, in other words, is what I'm saying.
And one last item I wanted to bring up, and I believe it's still the same, Elwood. Signs inside the window do not count for the square footage. Correct? And it pretty, I mean, in here, it says, or mounted inside windows protecting the face of the building, and yet the HPC, I've never had one come in front of the board, the interior sign.
Not to my knowledge, no.
But, I mean, they can be as wild and crazy as you want it to be.
Well, the pantry initially asked about it, but we don't control that.
Right.
That was the last one, that's the only one I remember, because they were going to do internal signage because what they wanted originally was to change the whole face of the building, and we couldn't allow
Right, they wanted to
that.
do some lattice work or something
Yeah.
out there. And,
Right,
yeah.
and so we went with the interior signage,
Correct.
and that was fine.
I think in that case makes sense because it's not irreversible, you know. A sign that's put up behind glass can be moved away with the next owner. But when you start doing modifications to the exterior of the building or the framework of the building for signage, then it starts to make a big difference.
I believe it came up with Eric Bodie's awning too, because we said no to the awning, and then his signage was gonna go in the windows, and that was fine.
Right, correct.
Now, that all said, if you have ideas that you would like to give me and we can incorporate or can create a draft, I hope that, you know, what we're doing here is improving the design
Right.
guidelines.
You said you finished Excelsior?
Yeah.
Is that online or on their website already?
Probably.
Okay.
It's right here in front of me.
I mean, to me, I'd like to read through it.
Yeah, I believe it's online
It is?
already. I think
Okay.
I went and looked at it once.
Yeah, look at specifically, one of the things that they were concerned about was that when staff made their recommendations to the commission, they like to be able to point specifically to things in the design guidelines. And we came up with a system where everything was lettered or numbered based on the particular topic. So general masonry was GM1, GM2, GM3, GM4 through whatever. And it was very helpful. And we tried to keep them still as guidelines, but at the same time, it would be able, the staff and the commission could say to whoever was applying for some change to their building, that this is approved or not approved based on G5 or, you know, so it gets into more specifics if you want to go that route.
I do like that. That's the reason I will look at it, because if you make that decision, okay, and the next individual comes in, similar but not the same, well, you approved Joe Smith's sign, mine is so similar, something to go to, like you just pointed out in Excelsior's. Well, the reason we did was S1, S4, S5, it met that criteria.
Yeah, and they took it even a step further, which sort of surprised me, that they were, you know, it wasn't the direction I would necessarily have encouraged them to go, but they made a distinction between shall and should. You shall do this, or you
Well, then you're
should
locked
do
into
this. Yeah, and so it sort of took a little bit of the fuzziness out of it in the decision-making process.
I don't know if I like the word should or shall. It's kind of-
That's why we're talking.
That's
Yeah.
why we're here.
Yeah, I'm not, I didn't like it so much
Okay.
myself, but the staff sure did.
I'm sure, Dave, are all your questions
Yep,
taken care of?
I said, oh,
Jean?
he won't have it done tomorrow, believe
No,
me.
no.
No, and like I said, if you want to expand, I think there was some talk about expanding areas that weren't even addressed,
Correct.
that we'll get into that. Good, okay.
I was just wondering, paint colors. Has our color palette changed, or is it still the same ones that we've had before? Or can we have more colors, or it's not
We don't
allowed more
We have
colors?
a color palette, we have a range,
Well, we do have color samples
yeah.
upstairs that we've given out. They're the same ones that we've had.
Before,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
Could those be put into the guidelines?
Well, I think colors are going to change and shades are going to change, but
I mean, I don't know if they've listed.
We
color.
generally don't get into color so much, other than to make recommendations, I mean, as far as commission.
the book does not specifically, the guidelines
No.
don't specifically call for colors. They have to be compatible with the neighborhood and not,
Correct, that's the way.
and
I
the
think.
building and not, I mean, you aren't going to put a glaring hot pink sign on a blue building.
Right, I understand that, but I just, I
Yeah,
know
I
we
think-
ran into a few issues way
Right.
back that,
I think like Jerry Chamberlain's building, I mean, those colors weren't
Right.
right.
specific, but they went along with that building, and I think it turned
That
out.
question came up with Allure, but it's that kind of a business and it fits the building, so.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I mean, in that circumstance, you've got some, just what you're talking about, I do remember Jerry's building. You have some things that do back it in here, and yet he wanted to go that step further. It turned out right, but
I guess one of the big questions is corporate colors. If there's
corporate
a
colors is the biggest
corporation
thing.
that comes in, is that something that's?
Well, again, I don't think it's an issue if you're talking about signage as much as if you're talking about painting brick, So you don't want to see, if it's something that's reversible, a painted sign, for example, is reversible. I mean, but once you start changing the building, the appearance of the building based on some 3M
and-
red or
yeah,
something, it doesn't
Generally,
make
it's
any
what the
sense.
signs that come in is what they're looking for. It's not so much the.
Yeah, just as long as it
itself.
doesn't, sometimes you could easily put a logo on sort of on the corner of a sign or the end of a sign and then have the rest of the sign fit in,
And that kind of came up with the blue and vapes too. you
Correct.
know.
Yep.
We discussed, because it's not a color but
Right.
I mean, again, we're not a museum, or it's not a museum, but it is an attempt to preserve a sense of place without disrupting that sense of place in any major way.
Any other questions?
No, I think we talked about the signs and going higher with them. I know there was some of the signs that we had in the past were only like 8 inches. And I know, sometimes it's very difficult to see those downtown. So increasing the size of the letters would be good too, and I think you covered that. Would be my only thing. So
Yeah, I think it's a call, I think it's when you look at it, if it doesn't make any sense,
Right, right.
if it's 12 point and it should be
Yeah.
36 point,
Yeah. Correct.
you should be able to see that, that it needs. Because you don't want to, obviously, nobody wants to discourage any business in their downtowns,
Correct.
You're one of the few lucky communities that seems to have a really living, vital downtown, so.
Well, I'm going to address some of my questions also, and it's going to have a lot to do, corporate lighting, corporate signs, oftentimes, and we came upon the issue with Anytime Fitness. Their corporate signs are interior lit plastic signs that, and we went and said, no, you have to put this, you can light it from the top, you can light it, excuse me, from the bottom. How are other districts dealing with corporate logoed signs?
I haven't had that.
You haven't had, well, you do now,
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Catch.
because it's one of the questions, and as more people are moving into town, I think we may get a few more of those. We had Home Medical is here, and I know that a lot of their signs, they did settle for the signage on the awning or on the, above the building, but the question has come up in the past, and
Well-
even putting them in an alley, and we said no to an alley also, because an alley is part of the guidelines, and so,
Mhm.
and it is visible. That
Yeah.
particular sign would have been visible from
As a
streets.
plastic backlit sign, is that what, yeah.
Yeah, so-
Yeah, I've, every time we've run into them in any community, we've always encouraged that they be removed and replaced with a flat sign above the awning or above the storefront. It's a pretty standard, because in most cases, we're dealing with buildings around the turn of the century. And in some cases, they've done that. I mean, especially like a Dunkin' Donuts or something like that. We've run into where they've actually gone and tried to fit into the community some more.
Okay, so
But as
nobody,
far as, corporate,
so nobody's really addressing that issue or the lighting and,
well, I mean, the addressing of it would be I would say you're doing the right thing
okay.
in not having any backlit signs, because, once one's approved, you're going to
It's all over.
have a lot of them.
Well, and then the other is the signage on the awnings. It says, I believe our guidelines state the signage should be on the drop down of the awnings, and
It suggested that as a location for signage, a recommended.
so we're allowing to go on top, so we may want to alter that.
Oh, okay. So, I guess I would, if I'm going to do a graphic, I'd like to see sort of what you had in mind.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if
On your
it's just
drive-through
letters or, is it up already?
Yes, there's awnings up already.
Is it a canvas awning?
Yes.
Okay.
There's two of
And-
them.
There's two of them.
Two.
The one I think of right now is on the corner of Center and Minnesota, Ashley's Bridal.
And Lola's, I think.
Lola's too, yes.
Lola's is the other one. Same block,
Correct.
Same side.
right, same side.
So you're saying that you want it just on the drop
The
down?
guidelines say that it's on the
Guidelines say
drop
that.
down, and I had my foot in my mouth saying, because they wanted it on top, I'm going, guidelines say, well, then she came with an example, and then by another HBC had allowed, and I guess I just had never noticed it. So I took my foot out and said, okay.
Well, it's not the end of the world. It's an
No.
awning,
No, no.
No,
But I'll take a look at that. I'll drive down after the meeting and, because, on whatever page that was, I was looking at that myself. I think it's on page 27 for signage.
Correct.
That was just didn't say it had to be there, but if you're going to put signage on an awning, it would make sense to do that because that was very prevalent. But there were, I can show you photographs of historic downtowns that had lettering that was like 10 feet tall, on
I
those
know,
long
I know.
stretches. Because they used to stretch them all the way out to the street. And so they had this big, it was like a billboard.
that's right.
And so, yeah, I think that, you have to use some common sense when it comes to how much attention you want to call to one building like that.
The other issue that I am questioning is there are, of course, National Park Service doesn't necessarily address demolition either, but we need to include some language, and I know that we had talked to
Michael Coop,
Michael Coop. I was trying to think who else I had talked to.
Jenny Way.
No, it was someone from outside of the HB,
Oh.
outside of SHPO.
Okay.
But who had run into the same problem. Anyway, Michael probably should give you some language. He had quite a few citations, and you,
Well, I found some websites that had the criteria for demolition and the steps to be taken to get to that point, which Mike said is very atypical. I mean, you're trying to preserve.
Yeah, I actually do think the National Park Service does have a policy on that, and they are what you should do.
Find it.
Yeah, what you should do, because it deals with
I think the verbiage-
historic, building documentation of the existing condition prior to demolition.
So we need some of this included, most definitely. Okay, I'm gonna turn to Betty.
I don't have any motions. No, they've covered them. I mean, you did the fitness.
Will there be anything included in the guidelines on the upkeep and maintenance of the facades of the buildings? There's several downtown right now that are privately owned, and they've let them fall into a little bit of disrepair, so it's not an attractive appearance to our residents and our tourists, but we don't really have an ordinance to enforce that. Is there something we can put in the guidelines to help with that?
Well, it's not an ordinance either, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if we need an ordinance, but if we at least have a guideline we can refer
Yeah.
to. Because right now, I don't think there's anything in there at all.
Well, demolition by neglect is a big problem everywhere. And it, I don't know what you would say about it other than, I mean, it's a policing power to go in and tell somebody they have to fix up their, and we're not dealing with a policing issue here in design guidelines so much as giving good recommendations.
Okay.
So, what we could include would possibly be some verbiage on the importance of good stewardship and things like that. But as far as putting a guideline in that says you must do this, and I don't know how you would do that.
Yeah, I'm not sure how you'd word it, but maybe
Yeah.
Maintenance.
That problem, though, isn't-
standards?
Yeah, but
Is that
that
the word I'm
problem
looking
isn't
for?
new to any city.
Right, exactly.
You all have that with the
Yep.
blight ordinances.
Yep.
Certain houses that need, the paint is falling off, the windows are falling out.
Right.
It's really tough, like you said, to police that.
Yeah,
I mean-
well, it's a policing issue, yeah.
And that's what it is.
That was addressed by the city of Faribault in one of the last SHPO meetings. They're really cracking down, but that is done through city, not the
Okay.
HPC. Their city attorney goes in and sends them a letter. If they don't do the cleanup within, and it's within the city that this is done, if the cleanup isn't done, then the city will do it, or they have claimed buildings back and now owned by the city and cleaned up, and then the city is selling them. They are taking these people to court. I
It's a
don't-
very lengthy,
I bet.
hard-run battle.
Yeah, I had a long conversation with their city attorney, and it's, he's had fairly good luck, but I don't know how it would fly here. You'd really have to have a much bigger department, and you'd have to,
You'd have to have somebody policing it.
somebody policing them, right. And I don't think we're in the situation that Faribault is in at this time. Faribault was in dire straits, and it was not only, it was going after all property, not just the downtown property.
Correct.
So.
Okay.
but that's
Classic
what they were doing.
example of the shall versus should.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And I had.
Well, but that's only in response to somebody that comes in for a building permit or
Right.
a demolition permit. It's not the people that are just ignoring their buildings.
Right.
Yeah, it was no different than, calling the street department and complaining about the unmowed lawns or that. I mean, they were really taking matters serious. You didn't have trash in your yard, you didn't have anything, and they were getting their letters, and it was working, but it was a harsh beginning.
Yeah.
John, did you have any questions about
No,
that?
I think anything that I had was covered before here, so.
Okay. Elwood?
Well, going along with some of that is just general lighting itself on the use of LED lights and stuff, and where that's heading.
Oh, yeah.
And then on the metal finishes, anodized versus baked finishes. I know we've had some questions on that, and I don't know if that's,
I thought, I'll have to go over the design guidelines. I thought that we did
says
talk
baked
about
enamel.
it just says baked enamel? Okay. We can certainly change or add to
That
that.
needs to be updated.
and then two, I think we need to look in there on, like Annie said, the alleys are becoming more prevalent with, I think there's a little blurb in there that they're becoming sometimes the main entrance into a building and not just the secondary entrance.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then on the demolition guidelines, I guess we'll see what what you come up with, but I know that those couple websites that I talked to you about, they actually had a criteria of, has the building been looked at for reuse, or what the steps have been done to try to use the building before it got to that point of having to come down.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was the other thing that I've done. I've done most of the reuse studies in this state, but we've done a lot of reuse studies, but they generally they're generally not in downtowns. They're generally in, well, in some cases they're Masonic temples, but oftentimes they're park structures and things like that. The reuse process as it was set up, going back to Charlie Nelson, I don't know how many of you may date back to Charlie Nelson as the architect down at SHPO, but we would recommend reuse studies for historic buildings that were vacant or underutilized, and would do a 3-day intensive study on that. But there have been some that have been in armories, things like that, that were generally already designated buildings. But any of the buildings in your downtown would fit into that category. But I don't know if you have any vacant buildings downtown that to speak of. That.
Well, there's a few of them
3 or
down there.
4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, George's Ballroom.
Well, I don't.
But I didn't count that one.
Put that off the list. That's,
And Elwood raised a valid point about the LED lighting. I've had several projects that I've been involved with that have wanted to use LED lighting, and dealing with Richard Rummel and Bob Herskovitz, that you know, they don't want to address LED lighting, but I have gone to the Smithsonian and asked them for recommendations and have gotten them, because that is all that they are using.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we do need some guidelines as
to look at that. Yeah, that's a whole new thing.
It is a whole new thing, and I know it's a very touchy subject because of the glow that you get around some LEDs, and you have to be very careful about the color, the spectrum, and things that you're using with LEDs.
Right. But you can buy light bulbs that look like light bulbs that are LED
right,
now.
I know. So this really does need to be addressed.
Yeah. Okay.
Elwood, did you have any more questions?
Nope, that's what I had on my list.
Yeah.
Were there other aspects of streetscape that you wanted to look at? For some reason, I thought streetscape was an issue. Were there any walls, things that weren't addressed in early design guidelines that we...
The only wall in New Ulm that is not in the guidelines, and it's in our district, is the picket wall that's by, and the last time Catherine Sandlin walked through, she was kind of like, but they approved it. So.
At the Kiesling House?
Yeah, at the Kiesling House. That's the only wall that's been a problem that I'm aware of.
but boy, you know, a comment on that. There were a lot of advisory groups that were talked to, SHPO and whatnot.
I know.
When this all took place. I mean, it wasn't just something the local HPC decided, oh, this is great.
I know.
All the protocol was followed
I
right up to the
understand that.
Capitol,
Right up to the Capitol
Yeah.
until they saw it.
and yet they were,
And
it still amazes me where you
Right.
people were given the picture, here's what it's going to look like.
I know.
And it was all approved, all the way up. Oh, that isn't what we thought it would look like. Here's the picture.
That's
I
exactly.
remember that well, very well.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of, and I'd recommend that you, if you get a chance, just look at this on the internet or however. I mean, I've only got one copy of it, so.
That's right. No, it's
You said it's on their website?
Well, I'm assuming it is. They
Said it is.
they had a
I'm sure it is.
PDF, yeah, they have a PDF of it.
If you want to look at that, and anything I forward to Elwood to forward to Tom, I'll just have him carbon.
Yeah.
So here's what I sent up, or if you want to comment, or,
I don't know of any streetscape issues that have come to me. You?
Lighting, public lighting of any kind? Okay.
Not to my knowledge.
The Excelsior story is a little different because they've expanded out into the cottage district, so
Okay.
a lot of the carryover is for residential type commercial. which you don't really have. Was there any sort of?
Wait a sec, well, there was the lighting, there's still the issue of the lighting at the, it's LED lighting, that's the changed computerized lighting at the gas station.
Yes.
Oh, Fisher Law?
Yeah, but they're not in the district.
Well, that's a National Register building, that's right, okay, they're not.
Yeah, they're not, yeah, this is only dealing with
Our district.
our
district.
historical, or
Okay.
the National Registry, and then our district.
Okay.
That goes outside the bounds a little bit.
Okay, so it stops at that block,
Yeah.
the one block out.
Yep.
Yep,
Yeah,
okay,
it stops at 4th. Yeah.
well, okay.
Were there any boundary? I thought there was some boundary discussion about potential change in boundary.
The only change in the boundary is that the demolished building, which was within the, it was at the edge of the boundary, is now gone, so it's,
Right.
I don't know how you're, I don't know if you want to draw that out of the boundary.
You might not. You might want to keep it in the to keep the boundary out
They
there.
put an alley there now, so,
Well, it's a parking lot
Yeah,
where it's at.
Pretty much a
Yeah, so
drive-through
it's-
parking lot.
yeah,
Yeah, it's gone.
Okay.
I mean, there's gonna be a little,
I think that it.
yeah, memorial or
Yeah, but
commemorative.
the alley came through, didn't the alley come through where the building was?
No, it's just all parking lot.
It's all
They're-
parking lot.
They're entering
Driveway?
the alley. Yeah,
Okay.
they're entering the alley on the backside.
I'm saying yeah, okay.
But would there be the potential of anything being built on the parking lot area at
Nope.
some future time?
No.
Oh, okay, okay.
In the next 100 years, anyway.
So I think that's really the only thing on district lines that
It's all the only one I can
I'd
think
heard of, yeah.
Because the other things that are across the street are outside the district, that are across Broadway, i.e. the Armory and
Correct.
those things, that's all outside the district.
Yep.
Yeah.
There are, I think when I did my sort of drive-through this evening or before, or earlier in the afternoon, there were buildings that had obviously changed, so I assume you want those changes to show in this report.
Correct.
I don't know if you want to keep this building in now that it's been changed, or does it just get dropped? This is a central or Center Street building
That's the old Thrifty White Drug, that's Eric's building.
It's been modified to look like this now,
actually-
so it's become the after, so do we?
That is actually very close to the original appearance of the building.
Yeah, yeah.
So that building should be the newly reflected in the guidelines.
Well, we always did before and afters. This is, the before doesn't exist anymore, so,
Some new buildings now.
Yeah,
yeah, there might be other
Good for us,
buildings.
that
you-
one's done.
That one's
Why
done.
keep it in the book?
no,
He
he could,
means-
but he could do the before and after in the book, is that what you're talking about?
No, grabbing other buildings.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, I'd take it only makes sense for me to just take this out altogether because it's done, it's been, the before has become the after.
Well,
But
then,
are
yeah,
there
pick
other
another
buildings that
building.
you would like to, I want to earn my money here.
well, there's several that come to my mind that really would be nice.
I'll get you a list.
Give me some buildings and we'll see, and there's like, the building 1 North Minnesota Street, the primary
Chamber.
change, the
Chamber.
chamber building was what they did with the storefront, and that's
Right.
been done.
That's been done.
So, I mean, I think that's pretty much history. There were some that had minor changes. I think there was one structure that had 3 storefronts in it, the Masonic block,
Oh, yeah,
Mhm.
it's done.
and the most northerly bay of the
Well, that's
Masonic block.
the Hippert Law and the dental.
Right here, this
Surgeons?
has been fixed up,
Yeah.
so I'd make that modification in the,
Right.
okay. So, I mean, what I'm gonna have to do is come up on a day when it's sunny and bright and cheerful and,
Not an eclipse.
Yeah.
and not an eclipse, right?
Got a little dark.
I
yeah.
thought I was gonna be driving in
Just
total
have to
darkness, but
Get
then,
L with the buildings you think and make the list.
maybe we could work at it from both ways. I can come up and drive through and make some recommendations, and you can throw some recommendations my way as far as the before and afters too.
I mean,
Because there may be some buildings that are becoming more important in time.
but
too.
you are right with that. That does need a major overhaul. 4 pictures I looked at are done or have been
Right.
modified.
Yeah, yeah, so,
Well,
Mowen's Bar I'm looking at, where it's totally different
Yep.
Yeah,
with the soda stone look.
And then, you know, I would take a look at the guidelines, what they call the guidelines, which are the specific pointed items for each of the categories: masonry, wood, signage, lighting. So, and see if there's anything in there that sort of stirs some interest.
okay. And you'll get him a list of the questions that we've had, and then
then-
we will get you
Buildings that you want to take a look at. Yep.
Is there anything else? Anyone have anything else for Tom?
There's
Okay.
one comment I do want to make. You brought it up a little bit about raising a building or demolition.
Yes,
You know, and we all know the property we're talking about.
yes.
One item you have to remember, and I told people this, was the HPC did their job.
Yes.
I mean, you followed this, whatnot. A lot of people were like, you know, what is the HPC thinking?
Yeah.
When I had the chance to explain it to them, you enforce this.
Right.
Council overruled your decision, is what it is. But I do give you credit. I mean, yeah, you did your job.
Right.
And contrary to
Kind of
the,
glad I was gone. I wasn't sitting on the board at that time anymore. But no, just a comment I want to make. That's really tough.
It
But
is.
council can overrule your decision. One of
that's,
the rare times they actually overrule HPC. Because we're one of the boards that 99% of the items don't go to council for approval or recommendation. So,
good enough.
Thank you.
Elwood, do you have our city report?
Just received in celebration of the 50th anniversary of National Historical Preservation Act of 1966. Congratulates New Ulm being on a certified local government and partnering with federal preservation programs since September 16th of 1996. So we got that in June.
Has there been any expressed interest in going to the Preservation Alliance?
I have not received any.
Okay. Kara, are you going to the Albert Lee?
In September, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there,
is that where the state conference is?
Yeah.
This, yeah, the state
Yes.
conference is the 13th through 15th.
and that's September? I still am undecided about that, but if you're going that, because it is strongly suggested that someone from the city at least attend, because it counts, it says well for our certified local government, our
Correct.
participation. I've gone to several of them in the past. It's still on my calendar, so it is rebatable, right? If you
Yes.
yes, if you submit.
Yeah, I believe we still get the grants for it, correct, Elwood? Going
Yeah, I
to the-
sent that out,
Right.
that information out that we got from Michael Coop.
Okay. Okay. So that is all I have. Is there any other business to come before the commission? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Good night.